Welcome to Caribbean Focus. Caribbean Focus is the community voice of the Caribbean Research Center at Medgar Evers College, the weekly radio program highlighting Caribbean educational, cultural, and social affairs. I am your host, Hermina Marcellin, and joining us virtually is a Barbadian, or should I say, Bajan performance artist, poetic activist, author, motivational speaker, and mother, Empress Poetry. Welcome to Caribbean Focus.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation and for having me.
You are most welcome. As I mentioned in the introduction, you are from Barbados, which was once British, like many of the other Caribbean islands, and now has gained its independence. And this speaks to the idea of colonization being intricate in our existence. Do you have any fond memories of your birthplace?
Oh, I have I got loads of fond memories of my birthplace, specifically beach days with the family. You know, the infamous crop over. That's the festival, our summer festival. Um, Gold Cup Day is like the derby here, the horse racing derby here. So we had those, we had that, and then there's like the community things, the church picnics and schools and school trips to tours around the island. It's like my favorite place altogether in the entire world is Harrison's Cave. And it's because it's just a place that you just can't imagine. It's just nature just doing her thing. But when you look at it, it's designed. And that's one of the things about Harrison's Cave in Barbados that I will forever be fond of. But slight correction, we gained independence in 1966. We're currently looking at becoming a republic. So that immediately breaks ties, well, control, British control. So that's the conversation now is to become a republic, like Trinidad and I think what's that, Guyana?
Guyana.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's what the lady Mia Motley is working on currently.
And your upbringing in Barbados, again, as you're describing your fond memories, have you now in America about the age when you moved into America, came to America, migrated to America?
Well, so I'm the only girl in my mother and father's union, right? It's four boys and me. And in the islands, they raise their boys. They love their boys, but they raise their girls. So the trajectory of my parents was that I was to graduate school, secondary school, and go to college. And at that time, my mom was already here. So my father's decision was to come here because my plan was to be a journalist back home. But that didn't work out because I wasn't going to be paying the tuition. And that was his thing. And that's so he insisted on medicine or law. And those were the only two options and as far as a degree. So I came here, I graduated from secondary school at 16. I came here and I was in college by fall, which was a month before my 17th birthday. And I've been here ever since.
And this is where I met you on the poetry scene in New York City,
Crazy.
as an invited guest on one of your many productions, and we will get to that shortly. Did you begin as a poet? or as a producer, and elaborate on how successful you were in merging the two.
So I started as a poet, right? And you remember in the 90s, to get on an open mic list, you had to know somebody that knows somebody that knew the host, at least. So if you weren't someone that when you walked into the spot, they recognized, then you didn't get a spot because everyone that came after you that was recognized got on that open mic list, and you little newbie, didn't. And I didn't like that. And it happened to me several times at some very like Blue Moon, Brooklyn Moon, sorry, and like the spots for poetry back in the 90s, and I couldn't get in. So I found this venue close to my college, and I approached a brother that owned the venue at that point, and I asked him, I said, hey, if you let me bring some of my friends in to do some poetry at your venue, then they'll bring their friends to eat your food and drink your drinks. And we could, so can we do this? And we did that for 3 years. And in the 3 years, I met tremendous poets. R.L. the Gifted One was one of them that ventured in because I was doing flyers, handing them out on campus and stuff like that. That was it. That was it for promotion. And
Yes.
and then that lasted. So while I was doing that for my satisfaction as a poet that needed a stage, other poets came because they felt welcomed to that stage. The same anxieties about being a first time poet and all of that stuff. Like I got booed at the New Eurekan the first time I went there. So I know that unwelcoming feeling, you know? So that happened. And then we had kids that were graduating from high school and going to college that were coming through. And because the event was like at 6 o'clock in the evening, and it was downtown Brooklyn at O's Cafe. I don't know if you were familiar with that, but it was right on the corner of Myrtle and Flatbush. So there's a bunch of high schools around there, and the kids used to come in. So they didn't serve. We made sure there was a menu that was like finger foods and stuff like that, kid friendly for that age group. And they started coming. So the owner started paying attention to what was happening. And he said, I like what's happening here. And then there was one young lady that was graduating high school and getting ready to go to college, and she needed money for books. And we raised that money, and the club owner matched the 300 that we raised, matched the what we raised. And she went off to college with $600 for her books. And I realized, wait a minute, so I can use poetry and still perform a purpose and be passionate about it. I'm like, you know what, we can make this happen. So it was poetry, and that pretty much led to opening a space for poets so that they can avoid feeling that rejection that I felt trying to get on the big stages early in the game. And it just went from that. So it one on one, they held hands together. So it was the poet that needed a stage, that made her own stage, and now produces events. So other poets and other performers, because I realized that though I love poetry and music blends beautifully. Mimi Spence and I, we kind of proved that theory. Rasasaje Fu and his when the children of Kobatala speak with all of the bands and the drummers and all of that, like the arts, they belong together. It's one big hug, there's no separation. So that's what my stages are. So now I'm at the Inkwell, and I've been at the Inkwell. I've been doing my events at the Inkwell now for about 15 years, 15, maybe more, 15, between 15 to 17 years, because we started at the first one on Rogers. And then as the event got bigger and people started going out the doors into the bar area because there was no space for them, then we went to Bedford. and that's where we've been from then till now. So it kind of came hand in hand. I had to find a stage for the poet.
And it definitely merged and definitely work. And as you continue to create an open space for poets alike, you have also documented some of your life lessons through works like Impressions of a Poet, Footnotes of My Journey, copyright in 2011, and Water into Wine, a part of the journey, 2015, and your first novel, Good Trouble, in December 2020. May you share with our audience some of these life lessons in your work?
All right, so Impressions of a Poet is my first officially published book. And like with the first child, you learn enough to be better with the second. So that was my experience with Impressions. It's a collection of poetry. Some of my first pieces I ever wrote, like this book has pieces that's been written 20 years ago. And it took me, I did the math the other day, it took me 13 years in total to publish my works.
13 years.
13 years. And again, it's the same concept, the same policy that I did with Finding a Stage, right? So I'm calling all of these publishing houses. And again, this is in the 90s and stuff like that. So 90s, early 2000s, you get, oh, well, there's no place in the market for poetry. Mm. And these are top publishing houses. Like I had a stack of rejection letters this thick, and it was one of the biggest hurdles I had to get away as far as a life experience. I had to get over rejection, and poetry helped me to get over rejection because they were rejecting my love. Like, poetry for me, if I'm reading a poem to you, I'm giving you a piece of me, and they are rejecting me. And I had a pile this thick of rejection that I sat and looked at for years before I finally said, you know what, I'm gonna try this again. So I paid this guy $300 for a book cover and to give me 100 copies of the book. And he brought me a photocopied, spiral bounded, purple covered book with no title, no name, no nothing. First time. And I was like, wow, this is rough. But the funny thing about that is, even though in my head this was a calamity, he brought the books to me the night of the event, and people bought the book. In that totally catastrophic space, because like I said, the book had no title. It was a purple cover. He bounded it with spiral binding, like nothing we talked about whatsoever. But that led me to a few years later trying again. And that's when Impressions of a Poet came in. And that is, like I said, a collection of poetry, including my signature piece, Journeys. I've seen still, as much as I've retired that piece, I still end up having to do that piece at the request of people in the audience anyway. So I could never retire that piece, that is for sure.
The name itself, Journey, seemed to encapsulate the thematic statement, right? Thematic statement of moving, of traveling. So it fits and seemed to be a great connection there.
Yes, I like that. I gotta put that down in the notes. So with Impressions of a Poet, one thing that I did learn was that again, as with your first child, you can't just send it off into the hands of a daycare of the daycare without actually getting to know the people that's going to be changing your baby and feeding your baby and you know and that's what I did. I put impressions in the hands of people that weren't licensed enough to take care of the baby. So that didn't work out as positively as I intended for it to. And it's all good because it led me to learning the industry of self publishing,
Mm.
which is how I published Watering the Wine, which is a collection of poetry and experiences and inspirational thoughts that I wanted to share it for a while, but I was scared. And then my daughter in 2014 said, Mommy, I'm going to Morgan State University. And I said, what? That's $40,000 a year. And you got to go there for 4 years. So that's like a lot of money. And she said, well, I'll do my part. You do yours.
Mhm.
And I never asked her what her part was because she showed me what it was. So she graduated out of high school, and I had just lost my job the same year. And I really had no other options but to use my gifts to build my wealth. So I wrote this book. And my part was writing this book and making sure that it was a success. Meanwhile, her part, she showed me, was says every grant, every scholarship, every opportunity that she could take to cut off anything off that tuition bill, she did.
Love
She became an ambassador of Morgan State University. So when other high school students and stuff came to visit the campus, she was one of the people touring and giving them the history of the school and guiding them through their enrollment process. And that was a grant. You know, um, she did she taught dance, which was her passion. She taught dance in a high school in Baltimore while she was at Morgan State. And that led to a stipend that was given to her room and board.
Mm.
She did Pepsi had Pepsi had a competition out that all she had to do was submit a dance video, and she got $1,500 from that. She researched different scholarships from different organizations within Morgan State University that were based in New York. So she became the first recipient of the Morgan State alumni of New York. She was the first recipient of their scholarship for 1,500. And then when she got in, so then I wrote the book, and the book helped, pad a few holes because Homegirl had it covered. I cannot lie.
And as you continue to speak on her covering and having things covered, not to take away even from your contribution as well, but I will quote you as saying that my best assignment is my daughter, who I credit as my best poem. I mean, how poetic. I mean, that's something a poet would say, you know. What do you mean by this profound description?
So people ask me that all the time. What do you mean? And I say it all the time. She is my perfect poem, right? So I held her the 25 almost 25 years ago. I held her in my arms and I looked down at her, and the only question that because I'm a single mom. I was a single mom. Her dad, he was at his place of business, walking back and forth, pacing back and forth, waiting for our mutual friends to call him and tell him about his daughter's birth. He was all of 10 minutes away from us, though. But so I held her in my arms and I looked down at her and I was like, well, what am I supposed to do here? Because I was raised by my mom and my dad. And even my friends that their parents weren't together, they still had a bond with. So I didn't understand and I didn't know that single parent lifestyle because, like I said, my parents were in my life and my friends' parents, even if they were not together for their children, they were there.
Mhm.
So I looked down into this kid's face and I was like, well, how am I supposed to do this? And this voice in my head resonated patience and love. And from then I like, so the child is, and this is about to be a poem, right? But she is the rhythm that sets my pace. She is my life in a metaphor. She's the personification of my dreams. She's simple yet complex. She's beautiful and melodic. She brings me peace and solution. And these are all the characteristics that I use to build my poems. And these are the energies that I got from her when I first held my perfect poem in my arms 25 years ago.
And it is important that we become role models to our daughters who are blossoming into womanhood. Was definitely as you speak about your daughter and also in connection with the productions that you curate and that you are involved in. One specifically that I mentioned earlier that we would get to was Empower You Women's Month celebration, Stop in the Name of Love, the Anti Domestic Violence Initiative. Could you expand a little bit about this initiative? Because I want to give you some time to share with us one of your poems, but could you quickly tell us about this initiative and is it ongoing?
So, Empower You is a commemoration of International Women's History Month. And it was an event that I curated just so that we can empower each other. As you know, sisterhood is very important to women. I know it's very hard to build, but if you find the right people to build it with and you have the right tools to build it with, then you can reinforce each other and fortify others. That's the way I see it.
Lovely.
So, Empower You was an event that I curated simply to get sisters to help. Not sometimes, there's a song that says you gotta encourage yourself, you
Yeah.
gotta bless yourself, you gotta pray for yourself. And Empower You is a poetic extension of that notion. Um,
Excellent. So the Empower You is ongoing or
yeah, both of the events are annual. Last
okay.
year kind of put us in a bad situation, but both of the events have been annual since Stop in the Name of Love since 2013 and Empower You since 2014 has been annual.
And you're also co-hosting an online radio poetry show called Spit,
Yep.
meaning spiritually powered inspirational thoughts. So you co-hosting, is this online? How, well, we are in a pandemic. What kind of question is that? I mean, come on, like I know you're not going to anyone's studio.
So actually, before the pandemic, it was actually via 963 IMG Radio is the platform that we're on, and so it was a call-in show, and you can call in and listen to it via the internet.
Okay.
But then COVID happened and Zoom became a thing.
Yeah.
So it went from just being a radio show to now we do radio and we do the live and YouTube so people can actually be there with us and not just hear our voices.
Excellent. We're going to invite you to please share um, at least some of your work or at
Okay.
least one piece.
Mhm.
And to our viewing and listening audience, I would like to again introduce Empress Poetry, who is going to share her poetry with us.
All right, so this is Water into Wine, and I'm actually going to read a piece that I wrote and I've never read, but it feels appropriate today. So it's entitled Inspired by a Broken Shell. I am but one shell on a shore where thousands more are also shattered pieces of their future self. Sitting still in hot sands, waiting for the occasional wave of joy to cool the heat of life. Though parts of me are missing, my beauty glistens in the light of the sun. Kisses on the wings reminds me I am a chosen one, and so I must stand out. Outstanding trials and tribulations because it must be done to promote my growth. Withstanding storms and dry seasons bears experience, this I know, so I endure. With faith and determination, even when I find myself on the floor of a cesspool, or times I find myself swimming with clownfish in a school. But hey, now my freestyle is a beautiful butterfly stroke, and that's cool. Waters rush over my shadow self as waves crash to the shores, taking back energy that burdens me no more, leaving me in cleaner surroundings on solid grounds I'm standing, no longer sinking sands, no longer placing my trust in man, but loving all the way. Proven it is in every move and every word I say, it's all I have left. Many frolic around me, conjuring death, but my spirit will not die. And these tears I cry, will flow into the sea. And I will be one shell on a shore where thousands more are also shattered. But I'm just trying to pull it together piece by piece. That's that piece.
Excellent, succinctly done. Well done. For anyone interested in purchasing your books or finding out some more information about your upcoming events, where can you be reached?
So my book is the only book I have currently until maybe another 2 weeks is Water into Wine on lulu.com. And in about 2, 3 weeks, you'll also find Good Trouble, which if I can just expound real quick on Good Trouble is a novel that I wrote during quarantine. And it's based on a couple that meets during the pandemic and finds themselves standing side by side, continuing the fight for justice and the Black Lives Matter protests, while in a war to stay healthy against the coronavirus and indulging in a steamy exploration of love.
Lovely.
So in 3 weeks, you'll find Good Trouble on lulu.com as well. When you want to find me, I am Empress Poetry on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Um, and on Tuesday nights at 8 p.m., I'm on 963 IMG Radio with Stick. I think that's about, unless I'm going to give out my address to the store.
No, we're gonna hold on to that. But what you can do is just give me a quick meaning behind Empress Poetry.
Empress Poetry is poetry is my world. It is indeed my throne. And I had to like put my crown on and claim it. So I am the empress of my poetry, not of everybody's poetry, of mine. And that's it. A leader in the game.
Thank you, Empress Poetry, for gracing the Caribbean Focus platform and blessing us with this graceful poem of yours. Again, what was the title?
From a broken shell.
From a
Let me
broken,
just make it set. Let me make sure I say it right. Inspired by a broken shell. There you go.
inspired by a broken shell. Thank you very much, Empress Poetry. I look forward to having you on soon.
Yes.
Yes, so I want to thank you. Thank you for joining me on Caribbean Focus.
All right. Thanks for having me. All right.
Uh,
Peace. Sis.
this has been Caribbean Focus. I am your host, Hermina Marcellin. Thanks for listening and watching. See you soon. Bye bye.
Bye.